we'll talk a little bit of, like, I think everyone here knows why they didn't make machine learning art, but it's also like you are not alone in those areas. Lots of people have struggled to be artists making machine images. Here's a list of like many other reasons why you wouldn't. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's low resolution. The highest resolution you can really get out of like any like image generating model is like 1024 by 1024. So if you're an artist who like, I want to print my stuff big, good luck. There are some ways around it now, but it's tough. I'll say like, so I think those first three are, you can overcome those, but I actually think these next two are the hardest thing for most artists, which is like, it is hands off. You are feeding a machine a bunch of data and you can't really tell it what to do. Like you don't really know what you're gonna get back. And that is like, so I don't know if anyone in here makes generative art like P5JS or other stuff, but like the idea of a generative thinking is like very different than most artists think about. Like most artists think, I have an image in my head and I'm gonna start painting that image. And with these two, like with these models, you don't get back what you expect a lot of times. And you have to be okay with that. Or you have to be like open to that as a part of your art practice. So some people just really struggle with those two things. It's like, some people just never overcome that, or like never want to, and that's totally fine. I will say many people told me there are a few examples. I hope today has like changed that for you. And it's hard to know where to start. I hope this class will also change that for you. So I'm hoping these two are overcome. Let's talk a little bit about those first three. 4 and 5, if you find out that's you, congrats on understanding a little bit more about your practice and knowing maybe this isn't for you, but that's fine. So, time it takes to train these things. So in this class, I'll generally talk about like these three different categories as like types of work that we can work in. Style transfer takes minutes. I can produce a high-res style transfer in about 10 minutes. That's 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels. Paired GANs, which is pix-to-pix and CycleGAN, those take hours, verging into days depending on what you're doing. So it might take a couple hours, it might take 18 to 36 hours to produce a model, training a model with that. With StyleGAN, it takes up to days or months. This is StyleGAN. This comes from the official repo. This is how long they expect training to take. So if you're on one GPU, you don't need to know what that is. But basically, that's like one Paperspace server, and you want to do 1024 by 1024. It's going to take 41 days and 4 hours to train it. Paperspace charges 78 cents an hour. So if you convert 41 days and 4 hours to hours, that's 988 hours. So 78 cents, it's going to cost you that much money. The good news is that like they're wrong. They're wrong because the way that they train stuff is very particular. There's also a technique that I've recently started working on that basically cuts this time by about 75%. Maybe even more actually. More. I'd say like we can actually now do some stuff. You can do it in like 4 days, which is actually pretty good. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, the last time I taught this class, I had just started learning about that technique and I didn't want to teach it to them. So they learned that this stuff takes forever. Thankfully, it doesn't as much these days, but it's worth considering. Like, there is still a cost here, right? Like, if you go out and buy pen and paper, like, it costs you $1, a couple dollars. Like, it's not the same as this. It's also really time consuming to make up data sets. So if you want to create a custom data set, for style transfers, you need at most 2 images. You need a style image and a content image. We'll talk about that later. For CycleGAN or like these paired GAN images, you need about 100 in each category. So that could be 200 total. And like I said, for StyleGAN, you want over 1,000. And like these can't just be like random images. They have to be like of a category, right? So like in the case of flowers, it's like I have to go find 1,000 flowers. That's pretty hard to do actually. That can take some time. So in the case of like StyleGAN, like you want to plan ahead to do that work. Or you need to start thinking about it now, so you can like slowly do it over time to generate it. So for a lot of the GAN work that I do, like it's like something where like I'm sitting on the couch watching TV all weekend, and I'm like slowly like finding new images, cropping them to the right size, putting them in a folder. Like so that could take me weeks to do that. An hour at a time. Again, next week we'll talk about ways that you could like maybe speed this up, but it's still a little tricky. So just know like for some of these things, it's going to take you some time to find images. Video is also a great way to like speed this up, but video only works to a certain extent. The nice thing is that when I started learning this, which was about here, I think this is 256 by 256. So when the first idea of a GAN came out, these were 48 by 48, 54 by 54, pretty small, like also not good, and also I think mostly black and white. Now we're at this point, so we're up to, I think this is 2048 by 2048. Next year we'll probably be doing double that. Again, it's like computer stuff where it just computationally you like learn more about this thing and you do more, and they figure out new techniques to make things happen faster, get faster hardware, like all this stuff. So, you know, if I were teaching this class 2 years ago, I would have said like it really sucks to make like good-looking images. Now it's like way different, way easier. So the tools we're going to be using in this class, we already talked about Paperspace, we already talked about Runway. If you don't have Photoshop, you'll probably be fine, but I generally recommend Photoshop to do some cleanup of images. We'll be using the terminal/command line, which is like the crazy hacker thing that everyone uses. I promise it'll be easy. No, I don't promise it'll be easy. I promise it'll be easier than you think it will be. Let's just say that. Doing lots of Python scripts. I've written a lot of different pieces of code and scripting things that'll help us move things along quicker. So for example, one of the things you might run into is you've got 1,000 photos of flowers. Some are horizontal, some are vertical, some are squares. If you want to do a StyleGAN, they all have to be square. So how do you crop 1,000 images into a square? If you're a designer who has never used code, you might open each one into Photoshop, crop them to a square, save them back out. That is really labor intensive. So I've written some scripts to help us do some stuff like that. And there's also some things with the paired GANs where you need an image with outline shapes or other things. I've written some code to help us like produce those quicker as well. So don't feel like, you might have an idea that you're like, I think this is going to be too hard for me to do. Pitch it to me first, and then we'll figure out if it's too hard for you to do. So we're using an FTP client. I also recommend an application called Gigapixel AI. It's like $75. You don't have to buy it. There's a 30-day trial. But what Gigapixel AI does, if you want to print work, it allows you to, it's a machine learning model, and what it does, it reses up an image. So if you ever try to res up an image in Photoshop, and you just like change the dimensions, you know it gets really blurry, right? And it gets blurry because it's just taking the pixels you've given it and trying to like make those pixels bigger, right? Gigapixel AI actually produces new content in those images. And I can maybe show a little bit next week about how that works. But basically it actually produces new pixels. So you get a much crisper image. And by much, I mean better than what Photoshop could do, but still not perfect. So it's worth playing around with if you really want to print your work. They also generally run sales pretty often, so like you might go get it for $50 at some point.